And we're coming to the end of our programme here today at Paris Live PM. And this, of course, is our segment called Live on Live. And today I'm joined by France 24 journalist Leela Jacinto to take a look at the background to this Sunday's constitutional referendum in Turkey. Now, we heard earlier from RFI's Tony Cross, who's in the southern city of Diyarbakir, in the run-up to the day Turks will decide whether to give Recep Tayyip Erdogan increased presidential powers or to maintain the status quo. And Leela, you were on the ground there only a week ago. The first question one must ask, even if the referendum is rejected, Erdogan still retains sweeping powers under the emergency laws instated following last July's failed coup attempt. But what's really at stake here for Turkey?
Well, first and foremost, you're absolutely right. And then I remember, I was speaking to a lot of people on the ground. And one of the people I spoke to belongs to the Gulen movement. This is, people who have been very severely persecuted in the past few months. And he had this quote that I absolutely remember. He said, maybe if the no camp wins, there could be more torture in the prisons. This is someone who supports the no vote.
So they expect there could be retribution. If this is rejected, that the authorities will just go, right, we're going to clamp down even further.
Exactly. And basically at stake with this new constitutional referendum are the three branches of government: executive, legislative and judicial. And what's happening is that Erdogan will have sweeping powers over all three branches of government. The prime minister will exist no more. He'll have just vice presidents. Parliament, their terms are going to be shortened and will happen at the same time as presidential elections. So, that power gets centralized to the presidency. And he will have, if this vote passes, inordinate powers over the High Judicial Council. So we're looking at really fundamental issues here.
And the irony is, when Erdogan first came to power with the AKP, he was really kind of like the great white hope who wanted to prove to the world that moderate Islam and democracy and capitalism can all work hand in hand. What went wrong?
I think what was critical actually is the Gezi Park protests. You saw a coming together of this fractured opposition. Yes. They never really managed to coalesce into a real political power. That was critical. Another very important thing that was happening is that he came to power with the support of the Gulen movement. And at some point, there were these corruption allegations, and the two Islamist allies basically split. And from 2014, we saw a crackdown on the movement. This got accelerated, of course, by the coup last July. So these are the things that are changing. So even within the Islamist camp, he is losing support among some factions of it.
Now, of course, just to remind our listeners that Fethullah Gulen is accused directly by Erdogan of being behind that coup plot of July 15th of 2016, and he's in exile in the eastern coast of America. But let's just look at something that you have been writing for France 24. You have chronicled the fate of the Yildirim family. Now, that is it's a pseudonym because we don't want to give the real family name, but of this family, and it's the first of a series of special reports entitled Turkey, the Great Purge. Now, the fate of this family from the coastal town of Antalya since July 2016 is truly heart-wrenching. Just give us a brief synopsis of what you encountered.
Right. So we interviewed this woman, I call her Asli, and she has had 5 male members of her family. Basically, all the men disappeared into prisons. Her husband, her father, and her 3 brothers. And what struck me, first and foremost, because, for this series, we've interviewed a lot of people who are affected by the purges. A number of them right now are starting to fight back in various ways, and you will see it in the profiles that will be published. The Gulen family struck me as someone who was particularly hard hit, and they simply had no recourse. That was what was very striking about them. In some way, they had assimilated the guilt, and they seemed to be aware that they had no cause for redress. So this woman, her husband was tortured. He is still not released. And the very arbitrary nature of how her family was treated. Some members were tortured, some were not. Some have been released, some have been not. And they have absolutely no explanations for how this is happening and why this is happening, and zero hope.
So the arbitrary nature is really it's almost like a torture tool, because they're going completely into the unknown.
Absolutely. Why, for instance, is her father, a retired businessman, still in detention, while as her brother, who's a former journalist with a newspaper that's allied to the Gulen, Zaman, exactly, he has been released. No explanations at all, and they seem so helpless. They told me that their only solution is to pray.
God Almighty, that's it. Well, I mean, the other thing is when you look at really the figures, like the post-coup purge has seen more than 130,000 people suspended or sacked from public sector jobs. Now, in this Yildirim family, these guys were school teachers. I mean, it's hardly like they're gun-toting, head cases. And of course, another 95,000 people have been detained, and people, of course, are afraid to talk. I mean, can you tell us any other cases that you were able to get when you finally got people to, I don't know, you gained their confidence and you were able to change their names? Give us some other cases that were not maybe related to Gulen, maybe just leftists or journalists. What did you encounter?
Exactly. So we actually focused on 4 profiles, which we thought were a cross-section of the people who have been affected by these purges. One was the Gulenist. The second is a Kurdish mayor from the Kurdish southeast, Diyarbakir. He lost his job like 87 other mayors, and they've been replaced by AKP, the ruling party appointees. He went into hiding for 18 months. Then we have an Islamist. He's a doctor and a human rights campaigner, very prominent, who actually stood for an AKP local party elections, but has since realized that, AKP is not delivering on all its democratic promises. And the last is this young woman, a leftist, a trade union activist, a feminist, and she has been protesting, and she's trying to highlight the impact that the purge has had on Turkish women who have been particularly hit. But of all these people, it was extremely hard to get someone from the Gulen movement.
Indeed.
All of these people have been charged on allegations of having links to the movement, which they don't. But someone who was actually a Gulenist, we had to try really hard to get this profile.
Quick question. What about the Gulen movement? Were the Gulenists behind the coup?
This is a big question. Gulen, of course, Fethullah Gulen himself has denied it. The people that I spoke to told me that even if there was a plot, how would we possibly know about it? The plot, by its very nature, would be highly secretive. How, as you said, would school teachers in Antalya be told...
Be brought into the loop on this big plan to overthrow president.
What is striking is that President Erdogan has called this movement a virus that has entered into state institutions. There is a tradition of these secret organizations in the Muslim world. The Muslim Brotherhood functioned like that. The striking thing is the AKP is doing the same thing, but they are, of course, politically active. They are in the government, but they have infiltrated into all sections of Turkish society. They have infiltrated the secular Kemalist institutions. So it's funny that they're playing the same game.
Well, it's like he's trying to pull all of the strings from all of the original movements and make them into one AKP joint force. I mean, yeah, go on, please.
The one thing that struck me, because I've been covering Turkey for a decade and more now, what was really striking me, if you ask me the one thing that struck me this time, is the change in the nature of the AK party, the Islamists. Back in the 90s, they were very much the downtrodden. I would go and they would be on their campaigns to, provide food to the poor neighborhoods of Istanbul. A very subdued lot. And now you see them drunk on power. This is the new equation.
And indeed, just last weekend, you were at an AKP rally in Diyarbakir. What was that like?
That was surreal. It was very hard for me to find anybody in Diyarbakir who were in the yes camp. But this rally seemed to be full of yes campaigners. And everybody who was outside the rally was at pains to tell me that the cars that came in, the license plates showed that they were not from Diyarbakir. So they were bussed in. And also the venue was very strategically chosen. It was a tiny venue. So the crowd looked a lot more, the place looked fuller than it should be. And the AKP, managed to bus in these supporters, but they are buying, supporters in Diyarbakir and these areas.
Giving people plots of land, making sure that the streets are all cleared and that there's that all of the facilities are all working and functioning. Well, that's a good old trick well, it works wonders. Well, I am just going to have to leave it there. My thanks there to Leela Jacinto from France 24 for being on the programme today. And indeed, that's all we have for Paris Live PM this Wednesday. But we'll be here at the same time tomorrow, same place. See you then. Bye-bye.